Hello, and welcome to this recap of the Google Forms workshop. This video is going to take a look at how to use Google Forms in your classroom and give you a step-by-step start on where to get going using forms in your classroom. So first thing we want to talk about is how to access Google Forms. And pretty simple, log into your Google Drive account. So go ahead and open your web browser. In the address bar, type in drive.google.com. And don't mind that, that's just a little weather alert going off in the background. Apparently we have a severe thunderstorm warning heading this direction. So after we go ahead and get over to Google Drive, I'm going to recommend that whenever you create a new form, go ahead and make a new folder for that form. The reason being, if you're like me, I like to see the results in a spreadsheet form. And when we make a Google form and have the responses go to a spreadsheet, it's going to create a whole separate file. So by making a folder, it's going to keep all the associated files in one location. Just helps for organization, but in the end, it's your Google Drive. You do with it as you see fit. So remember to make a new folder. We just go up to new, a new folder. Okay, sorry about that. That's the other weather alert system popping in there. So we must have some good stuff coming this direction. Okay, so yeah, go ahead and click new folder. And as you can see here, I'm inside of a folder that I titled Demo Form for Workshop. The other thing I want to take a look at under this new, if we want to create a new form, I don't get this Google, this is one of the most popular features inside of G Suite for education. But yeah, you have to come down here to more and then click Google Forms down here to create a new one. Just an extra added step in there that's unnecessary. But in the end of the day, it doesn't really make a difference. So to create a new form, we're just going to go new, more, Google Forms. Okay, and here is what we get when we create a new form. To give you a little tour of what is going on here, we have the title of the form right here. As you notice, it matches what is written right here. If we type something in one and go and click on the other, you'll see that that automatically changes. The other thing I want you to notice is that whenever a change is made to a Google form, it is saved automatically. That is the beauty of G Suite for Education. You don't ever have to hit save. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this demo form. Click down here and you see it automatically brings that over. So the tour of the menus going on here. If we want to move it to a different folder, here's where we do that. If we want to add the star to mark it as a starred file for easy finding later. Add-ons, we're not going to really talk about any add-ons today. This is a entry-level, hit the ground running introduction to using Google Forms in the classroom. Next, we have the color palette. You'll notice this color in the background. It seems like every time I make a new form, this is the default. So if we click on the color palette, you can choose any of these colors. And you'll also notice the classic little icon for an image down in the bottom right. If we click on that, there are a lot of pre-made images that you can choose from. You'll also notice that you can upload a photo and you can also pull from your albums if you have photos stored inside of Google Drive in the photos section. These look like Mike and Ike's, which are my favorite candy, so I'm going to go ahead and choose those. And you'll see it automatically changes the theme. There we go. Next button is Preview. This is a useful tool so you can go back and forth between seeing your view as the person creating the form as opposed to the person that's going to be filling out your form. So if we click on that, you'll see this pop up, and here we go. Go ahead and switch back over. Next, we have settings. We'll get more in depth with this more towards the end. Go ahead and cancel here. We'll save that for later. The send button, this is how you're going to get it out to your intended audience. You notice we can share via email, we can send a link, we also have an embed code, we have some social media tools as well. So we can close that. Next, we have the three buttons, or the three dots for the more actions menu. The classic undo button, make a copy if you're going to use the same form from one year to the next. Good example of that would be sorry about that. Okay, this I use this a lot for when I'm doing things with student council. So for my elections, historically, I used to do it by paper. I would have to make a form, print it off for all the students in the building, and then collect each one of those. You know, for student council elections, I'd have to do a different form for each grade level. And for homecoming court and homecoming king and queen, I would have to collect all of those and then use tally marks to figure it out. I have switched over since all of our students have MacBooks at their disposal. I now create Google Forms for this. And it took what used to be 6 hours of counting and collecting is now, you know, instantaneous. I send the link to the teachers, ask them if have the students filled out first period. I catch students as they come in from college classes or wherever, and by the end of the day, I have all the students' responses, and I just click on the view responses, and I get an instantaneous calculation of who has won the election. So that's just one example. You know, if I were still in the classroom, I'd be using Google Forms quite a bit for collecting student data. You know, you could use it the very first day of school for getting contact information, like to get the student's email address that they prefer to use. While I would recommend they use the student supplied one from the school, maybe they prefer another one to go with. And along those same notes, this get pre-filled link, this is useful for that scenario, because if you're going to use the same form for every single class that you're teaching, maybe one of them is which class period are you in, and you could fill out that question for them and use this get pre-filled link and supply fourth period with the fourth period link. That way they don't accidentally click something they shouldn't. So that's the point of this get pre-filled link. All right, the other parts, we have move to trash if you're all done with this form and you're never going to use it again. We can print, which is very handy. This will actually give you a bubbled version. If if the internet's down, this is a great backup to have. You're not going to get that instant feedback that you would, but at least it's in a very easy to view format. We have the add collaborators, and then we're not going to mess around with script editor or add-ons in this. So add collaborators, just like everything else. If you want somebody else to be working on this with you, you go ahead and add them there. Next thing to take a look at, here's my profile picture. That's just which account you're using to make this form. Now we come down here, in the next line we see questions and responses. We don't have any responses right now. We'll talk about that more towards the end of this clip. So now we have the title of our form, and then we can actually give a form description. So I'm just going to leave it where it says form description, because that works for this. You could put, this is a history lesson, so this is the form description could be Cold War quiz, or identify the chapter or anything like that. Here's our first question. You'll notice when I go to a question, we get these 6 little dots in the middle. This allows you to drag and drop and reorder your questions later on. So for our first question, let's just do let's just go ahead and play on that alarm we keep getting in the background there. And you'll notice that a lot of times it will kind of sense what type of question you're going with, and it will change. So let's go over the different options we have here. We have short answer. That's going to be, almost like a fill in the blank type thing, or a really short response that's just a couple words. Paragraph is, the students aren't going to have the option to really edit if you're looking for a full-blown essay with proper formatting. But if you're looking for them to type a paragraph answer, this is the format you'll want to go with. Multiple choice is going to give them as many options as you allow them to have. Checkboxes is going to be, instead of having a little circle, they'll have a little box instead that they'll hit the check box. Multiple choice, they can only choose one response. Checkbox is that classic choose all and apply. Drop down is the same as multiple choice in that aspect, where you can only choose one answer. But if you have a long list of options, you'd want to drop down, because it's going to slim down the scrolling. The students, when they're filling out the form, aren't going to have to scroll through to look at all the different, or to get to the next question. The drop-down menu is only going to have the responses available when they click on the drop-down menu. File upload, this is going to allow the students to upload a file, be it a picture or a document, or from Google Drive. Linear scale is your Likert scale type question, where, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about this? Multiple choice grid is similar, but instead of just one line, you have vertical and horizontal, and you can choose from a grid instead. Date and time, this is handy if you want to have these students, or even the parents, if you're scheduling conferences, or a time that the students are going to choose to present. Those would be examples of where you might use the date or time option. Personally, I don't really care for these, because I have them dump into a spreadsheet, and like always, the formatting seems to go off when you have a date or time in there. It wants to change the way it's automatically formatted in the spreadsheet itself. But like I said earlier, to each their own. You do with it as you see fit. So for this example, we're going to just do a multiple choice. Okay, and you'll notice we also have these add image buttons come up. If I had one that I didn't want to have in here, I can just click the little X to remove it. I can also do an add other. Now, this isn't available on all the different options, and you'll notice that as you're making your questions. But I can have add other, and that's going to allow the recipient to type in their own response. So a good use of this is really in foreign language class. You could, instead of having, or really you could do it in any class. If you want them to identify a picture, or in foreign language, it could be, which of these is the color red? Obviously, you'd be saying it in the foreign language, but they'd have to identify the word in your question and then pick it out by, we can click on add image, and we can do a search, and just do the color red. There we go. We could have that added in. And now if we switch over to the preview, you'll see that's how it's going to pop up now. So if my question was, which is the color red, they would have to identify which color here, and then click on that one to respond. Or you could have, which of these is a microscope, or however you see fit. I could see this really being used for geography if you have multiple countries to choose from and they need to identify a specific one. That'd be a great use there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and delete this image because that's not really going with this question. Now that we have this in, we have duplicate if we want to do the same type of question with just maybe a change of one word. We can delete the entire question. Now this is a very important one. If you want to make sure a response is given for a specific question, you click on this and it makes it required. So the students cannot submit or move on to the next section until they have answered that specific question. Now what we have here is the 3 dots. And this is something that I thought disappeared, and we have show description. That pops up now. I thought this went away when they changed to the new version of Google Forms, and this is so handy for me if you're doing like a Likert scale question. How do you feel about the weather today? I would be writing, 1 is not happy, 5 is very happy. Well, having this show description, you can now move that part down into this description instead. It just is easier on the eyes when somebody's filling it out. You can also give a little bit of help. Another thing to look at is this go to section based on answer. When we talk about sections a little bit later, that'll make more sense. And shuffle option order, that's going to be for if you're doing a quiz, you can have it move these around automatically. All right, so let's talk about adding another one in. This bar off to the right-hand side, the plus sign is going to be to add a new question. So you'll see that automatically pops down here, and you see these dots again, like I was talking about earlier. You can just click and drag to reorder. Drag, drop it in where you want it. We also have these two T's. This is for adding a title and description if you're going to do another section or another area. Maybe these first ones are all going to be true and false, so you're going to add a title for that. And then the next one's going to be fill in the blank, or however you're going to set up your form. Next, we can add an image. So let's say we have a map that has 10 different countries. They're all numbered 1 through 10, and then the next 5 questions are going to be which country is number 4, and they have to fill in the blank. However you want to make your form, you go ahead and do that. Next, you have the option to add a video, and you can either pull a URL from somewhere else, but it's going to need to be a YouTube URL. We can also do a video search. So if I want to search for Calvert Catholic Schools, we can see a video pop up. So you could add a video in and then have the next few questions go around that video as well. So go ahead and cancel here. And then finally, section break. The most useful way I found for using a section is, like earlier I was speaking about doing the student council elections. Instead of making a different form for each grade level, what I ended up doing was making one form for elections and then just doing a different question for each grade level. So the first question on my form was, which class are you? 8th grade, freshman, sophomore, junior. And then based on their answer, so let's go ahead and put that in. Let's add a couple sections in. Let's see, I had a section 2 of 2 here now, so let's call this grade 8. New one, and I'll just go through and make these real quick. All right, so this example, if we have 8, and obviously I'd want them to have to answer this, so I'd make it required. We can add this, hit this button, and earlier I said go to section based on answer. So if we add that, you'll notice this line comes up here. So if they respond with class 8, do you want to go to the next section? Yeah, it would work for that one, but I really want them specifically to go to grade 8. This one's going to be grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11. The other thing to notice down here is after selection 1, continue to the next selection. Well, this is automatically going to take them over. So they're only going to need to fill out the 1. So I'm going to have them submit form. Maybe you want one form for, you have 3 different sections of a course, and you want them to each have different questions. Maybe that's something that you're going to be doing this with. So now you can see that, and let's go ahead and go back to the preview. Then we'll go ahead and select 10, next. And there's no question in there, so my only option is to submit. But these would be the specific questions to grade 10. You could have it for your different class periods, however you want to set up your form. Okay, let's take a look at the different settings. This gear icon right up here, this is the settings for your specific form. We have 3 different lines across the top here: general, presentation, quizzes. So for general, do we want it to collect an email address? If you're not going to have that question there, but you want to make sure, like maybe we have name, we want to make sure that the person filling this out is the person whose name is listed. That's a way that you can catch kids doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We go ahead and collect email address. I use that for my forms that I do for my elections. That way I can make sure that the kids voting for the 8th graders have 8th grade accounts, and so on and so forth. Response receipts, that's going to, if we click on this little, respondents receive a copy of their responses. So you can choose whether or not you want them to get a copy of their responses. Might be useful if you're doing it for a formative assessment so that they can look back at what they said earlier. Require sign-in if you want to restrict it to your domain. You're going to click this button. I really like this feature because that means that no random people can get on and fill your stuff out. They have to be in your domain. If you want them to only answer once, that's what this limit to 1 response is going to do. So obviously I use that for election type stuff. If you're going to do an assessment where you say they can take it as many times as they feel like, you could have that unchecked. But if you want them to only fill it out once, it's going to collect their email address and make note of whether or not they've already required it, or already filled it out, I'm sorry. Okay, respondents can edit after submit and see summary charts and text responses. I usually don't have these on there, depends on what I'm using the form for. So if you want them to be able to go back and change their answer, that's what this edit after submit is going to do. And see summary charts and text responses, that allows them to see what other people have responded. So that could be useful in your classroom if that's the type of form that you're going for. Presentation. If you have multiple sections, you can have this show progress bar at the bottom. It'll say you are 10% through, 50% through, 33, that classic thing. Shuffle question order is very useful if you're doing quizzes. That way we don't have wandering eyes in the classroom. They're not going to be seeing the same questions at the same time. And as I have the limit to 1 response selected, I cannot choose show link to submit another response because they can only fill it out once. Confirmation message. This is an area where you can thank the audience for taking time to fill out your form, or give a word of encouragement to your students. And my favorite new feature, I say new, but it's been around since, I want to say December of 2016, that is quizzes. It used to be you had to use an add-on for your response sheet in order to do quizzes. Now all you gotta do is go in settings, hit quizzes, and hit this little toggle switch, make it a quiz. So our options here: release grade. Do you want the students to see the grade immediately after they've submitted, or do you want them to see it later after manual review? If you're going to be doing paragraphs and such, this is going to be what you want to do. I'm just going to go ahead and select that for this. And what do you want the respondent to see? The missed questions, the correct answers, and point values. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want them to see the point values. Or the missed questions is a very useful thing so they can go back and review. But if it's something that you're going to allow them to take multiple times, you don't want them to see the correct answers. That's not going to serve its purpose. But as always, to each their own. Okay, now that I've made it a quiz and I hit save, that's one of the very few times you ever have to hit save inside of Google. You'll notice some of the things I changed. This form is automatically collecting email addresses for the domain, so I don't need to put a question as what is your email address. Now when I click on a question, you'll see down here an answer key. If I click on the answer key, I can assign a point value to it. I can say what the correct answer is. Actually, I can't have an incorrect answer with this one. And we can also add answer feedback. This is phenomenal for teachers. If they have an incorrect answer and you're asking a question about the Cold War, you can give them this feedback, specifically saying, hey, go back and look at that video we had in class on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Go back and look on page 85 of your textbook. Correct answers. Hey, you did a great job. You can also add links if you need it to go to, maybe you have something in Google Drive for your study guide or something like that. You can link to that so the students can take a look at it and then have this text. So that is such a useful tool that I would love to be using if I was still in the classroom. So go ahead and close that out. All right. So that's how you make it a quiz. And now let's go ahead and look at responses. If you had student responses here, well, let's go ahead and fill it out. Let me hit the preview. And I'll fill this out real quick. I think grade 11 had a question in it. And it is going to be rainy. And we hit submit. All right, now you'll see that responses. I have one response. So you can at a glance see how many of your students have already answered it. Insights. Immediately, you get the average, median, and range. Here's the point distribution. It'll make more sense when you have more responses in there. And here's that release scores button that I was talking about earlier in the settings for the quiz. When you release scores, the email address is going to get a response with what they got. You can see that the score was already released because I had immediately on response. Now here's our questions, and we can at a glance see how people have answered. So great tool for formative assessment there. You can see how students are answering, what you need to quickly go back over, maybe the next class period, or if you started class with it, here's what we need to talk about today. And here's the final question that I had in here. I only had one, and the answer was rainy, and I didn't set that up for a point value, so that's why you don't see a score or anything there. Now, like I said earlier, I really prefer to get it in a spreadsheet. Okay, let me talk about these before we get to that. We have summary, as you saw, the quick glance at all the different questions. We have individual questions and how they answered. You can see we have the two questions that we can go through and see. And you'll notice it says ungraded because I didn't set up auto grade for that one. Now we have individual. So now we can see the student's name, and we could shuffle through each individual one if I had more responses, and we go through and we can see what their actual responses were. We can print them out, we can delete them. Another thing to talk about is this accepting your responses. When I'm doing elections, I have it and at the end of the day. So I just open up my form, I click this button, and it's no longer accepting responses. So if you're going to give them a deadline on when they can fill out the form, you can go ahead and click this button and have it so that they can't submit anymore. Okay, if we wanted to create a spreadsheet, we'll go ahead and click this button here. You want to select an existing. For this, we don't have one, so we're going to create a new. And you'll notice by default, it always puts the title of your form and then the responses. So I'll hit create. And it takes me over to the responses. If we take a look at our folder that we made earlier, you'll notice that the spreadsheet has now automatically been dropped inside of that folder. So here we go. Here are the responses. We have timestamps so you can see when the student responded. We can see the score that they got and each of their individual questions. So other uses that I do with Google Forms is going to be like for my workshops. When I have people sign up, I actually will go and use add-ons so that it'll automatically send emails out to everybody. But that's for a whole different video there. But here we can take a quick glance and see all the different questions and the different responses.